Hello, it's Amy, and I am back at it again. If you're watching me on YouTube, you'll notice you can't see me or my lovely guest. I wish you could see her. She's so beautiful. But we are just going to do this as a podcast today. We are going to use two visuals, two wonderful pieces of fan art that we both got permission to use. But otherwise, if you're listening on YouTube, sorry, you really can't see our faces. But this will be as a podcast, and I just started transferring all of my YouTube videos to podcast form. And Julie and I decided that, you know what, we don't need to get put on makeup and get all dolled up. Let's be comfortable and let's just have a great conversation about Jon Snow. So that's what we are going to do today. So we wrote a letter to Jon Snow, and we're going to read it for you and have a discussion. But before we do that, you know me, I'm going to do all some plugs. So I'm always on John Webster Film on YouTube at 7 p.m. Eastern every Saturday. We talk about films. It's awesome. Please join us. The Unspun Yarn, my friend Nessie and I have something called Bleep the Patriarchy, where we do amazing feminist analysis. And we are going to talk about the binary. On February 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern, that will be live on her channel once again, The Unspun Yarn. So what do I have coming up? Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're a Song of Ice and Fire fan. In addition to this Jon Snow episode, which I'm very excited to get to, I'm also going to have Bronze Staries on the channel, and we're going to talk about black and white symbolism in A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm going to specifically be talking about yin and yang. You might know it as yin and yang. I'm also going to talk about Mulan and her parallels to Brave Danny Flint and Alaris/Sorella. So that is going to be very fun. If you're His Dark Materials fan, I have an upcoming video with Lo the Lynx about Mary Malone and Avatar The Last Airbender. I just did my first ever Avatar content where I looked at Chinese characters and character names in Avatar. So please check that out if you're a Last Airbender fan. My next video is going to be with a full panel. Steven Stark, Archmaester Buzzkill, and Lady Triple are going to be on to talk about the Air Nation. We're going to have a good time. But enough about me and what we're going to do. Let's talk about Jon. So if you check out my blog, you will find the written version of this, but we're going to read it here for your listening pleasure. So Julie, take it away.
Take it away. So this was written by Julie Araya Flint and Miss Amy Blackfire, of course. Dear Jon, you know nothing. We are so mad. We want to scream and rip out our hair, tear at our skirts, and gouge out our eyes. Your death is horrible, unforgivable, and tragic. You'll be sorely missed, and the realm is weaker without you. We want to scream at you, and have felt that way for a while, at least since you've been named Lord Commander. Your death was accomplished with 4 awful blades, but also in 1,000 cuts. You were brave, loyal, loving, humble, and empathetic. You have many qualities of a great leader, but you're so young and didn't have enough training by politically savvy teachers. Could anything have prevented your death? Maybe not, but we're still really pissed at some of the ways you acted lately. Melisandre was right. You shouldn't have avoided the trappings of power.
Will my lord be wanting a tale? You were offered a tale several times, but refused because you hated having guards follow you around, looking like a mother duck leading ducklings. We understand it's a new role, being the Lord Commander, though you've seen several examples of other leaders with a tail or a group of guards. You've seen this before. When you first met Mance Rayder, you thought him a king in more than name, and he was surrounded by Jarl, maybe Jarl, I say Jarl, Harma, Varamir, and Styr, or Stir. Having a tail offers several advantages. It establishes you as an important person in the eyes of others. You get to know the people in your tail, and they get to know you. Ned Stark feasted a different man each night to get to know those who fight or work or fight for House Stark. And those on your tail act as your emissaries. You literally would have people at your fingertips to do your bidding or to surround you from intrusion, friendly or not, by others. Would Godry have yelled, "Boy, you there, boy," to a man with a tail? Maybe. But Godry wouldn't have gotten close enough to issue a challenge and say that Lord Commander Jon Snow is scared to use his sword. Having an entourage is special and makes you special. You stand out from the crowd and are distinct from the other brothers of the Night's Watch. We wish you'd recognize the usefulness of a tail, rather than dismiss it as something only a mother duck would do. and mothers and ducks are awesome.
The king's tower, tall enough, strong enough, and well placed beside the wall. Your murderer, Bowen Marsh, wants you to move in to Lord Commander Marmont's chambers after it was vacated by Stannis. Yet you refused to avoid the impression that you think Stannis won't return. Bowen Marsh is the lead steward, and in this, he was trying to do his job. It's appropriate for the highest ranking person to live in the best available chambers. It would establish you as a leader, put you in the same group as Mormont and Stannis as people who live there. The King's Tower has multiple rooms with a solar and several sleeping chambers, as you remember from living there as Mormont's steward. There's also a set of stairs leading to a door where both Mormont and Stannis kept guards. As a practical matter, the King's Tower is well placed. It's beside the wall, and the stewards are already used to traveling there to deliver meals and messages to Mormont and Stannis. If you didn't want to move into the King's Tower, you could have ordered the repair of Elsie Mormont's former quarters. Instead, you sleep in the armory. Donald Noy was a phenomenal human and friend, though you're not following in his footsteps. Your predecessor is Lord Commander Mormont. By sleeping in the armory, it demonstrates humility, but could also be perceived as indifference. If you're indifferent about where you live, folks may think you're indifferent to your position as Lord Commander.
Best keep that beast of yours locked up tonight. When Tormund finally arrives at the wall with his group of free folk, you and him have a fascinating conversation. Tormund tells you he had to kill his son, Torwend, because he was a white. You see men of the frozen shore with bone chariots and take free folk hostages. At the end, free folk coming through the wall, you meet Tormund's rear guard, including Boruk, a warg with an enormous boar, twice the size of Ghost. Tormund says that he'll ask Boruk to lock up the boar and tells you to do the same with Ghost. Boruk calls you brother, likely in recognition of fellow skin changer. Boruk is glad to be on this other side of the wall, and you take Tormund's advice rather than assert your own authority. You and your big heart allow Boruk and his boar to reside in the castle area. Because Boruk and his boar are hanging around, you leave Ghost in your chambers while going about your business. I realize you have plans to send Boruk to live elsewhere, but why didn't you send him away immediately? Boruk and his bear are an active threat, and his boar are an active threat. Yet you didn't press your advantage to reduce the threat. Instead, you changed your behavior when it's the duty of subordinates to adjust to their leader. You weakened your position by locking up Ghost when it should have been Boruk's boar locked up. Jon, Ghost is your tie to being a Stark, and he is your protector, friend, and your soul.
Trouble is the Lord Commander's lot. Jon, you know that some of your black brothers think you're a rebel, turncloak, bastard, and warg. You've seen men turn away as you cross the yard and have had several arguments with Bowen throughout A Dance with Dragons. When Bowen suggests sealing the wall, your response is mixed, thinking Bowen may not be wrong because a high wall is a great defensive position, but that sealing the wall goes against your instincts. Yet you don't offer a strong defense. Instead, you offer a weak excuse that Stannis won't let you. Who's in charge here? I know you're walking a fine line with Stannis, that you need to show gratitude for his defense of the wall in a fight with the free folk, and some deference to a king. You realize that half the men, stewards and builders, agreed with Marsh's plan to seal the wall. The Rangers and the Foresters didn't want to seal the wall. Still, you don't create a plan to build consensus with those that disagree with you. You could have asked the Rangers and the Foresters to try to convince others to leave the gate open. When Bowen Marsh asks for a plan on how to feed the free folk, you offer another weak response with, "We'll find a way." You eventually think of a way, buying food from the money received by the Iron Bank of Bravos. But you don't explain that to Bowen or show acknowledgement that feeding all these people is a huge problem. "We'll find a way" is a platitude, not a plan. And it doesn't give confidence to Bowen or Dwyer who are rightly worried about feeding so many people. You keep wondering why your brothers don't see the free folk as people or as future members of the army of the dead, yet you don't mount much of a PR campaign to win them over. You have first-hand experience with the mutineers who plotted against L.C. Mormon and eventually killed him. You can't afford to set in the ranks, especially if you're making a risky but big-hearted decision, letting in the free folk. We agree with your decision, yet we wish you had spent more time gaining consensus. Leadership is tough, especially of the Night's Watch, a hodgepodge of men, some with a checkered past, and most with a long history of hating the free folk. You saw what happened to the man who previously held your position. Why were you not more cautious? They have proven themselves disloyal before, and you should not have assumed any leal service from them during your tenure as Lord Commander.
The Night's Watch will make for Hardhome. I ride to Winterfell. We cheered so loudly when you first said that and cried with joy when the crowd roared back. You have a gift for bringing some people to your side. Many see your innate goodness and sincerity. You make the wildlings yours, and that's great, but it costs you the faithfulness of the Night's Watch. Why didn't you use the gift of persuasion on your Night's Watch brothers? Saying that the Night's Watch will make for Hardhome while you ride for Winterfell is tantamount to saying you're no longer in the Night's Watch. You made your plans with Tormund, not with the Night's Watch leaders, and they were obviously stunned and angry with your announcement, given that they stabbed you soon after. You shouldn't have been stabbed. The Night's Watch could have arrested you, held a trial, even though you're a free folk would have been able to stop it. Arrest, arrest and trial is a legitimate course of action for the Night's Watch. You also could have held a quick meeting with Night's Watch leaders, Selyse, Tormund, to discuss the pink letter and let them bring ideas on how to respond. Another course of action may have presented itself. You were right. You should have gone to Selyse and told her privately about Stannis' reported death. I know you felt guilty about Mance and that speaks well of you, but rushing off to save him and answering the challenge in the pink letter is breaking your oath to the Night's Watch.
Ghost. We hope you get a second chance at life and that Melisandre or someone brings you back. You're a good person, and the realm is better off with you in it. We hope you live on in Ghost for a bit to experience the word bond in full and learn to be a bit more wolfish. You're going to face several challenges because of your royal blood. You likely were designated king in the north by Robb, and your dad was Rhaegar Targaryen, so the Iron Throne could be yours to lose or refuse. The White Walker army is headed your way, and we don't think the Night's Watch and Free Folk will suddenly like each other. A bit of wolfishness, like your mother Lyanna, will be needed to handle these multiple threats and help you contend with your Targaryen heritage.
And that is the end of the essay. Thank you for
Yay!
going on, kind of passing the baton back and forth, Julie. I thought that was really fun.
It was amazingly fun, and I noticed that you got all of the hard names to pronounce, but you did
I
great.
can't. I am on Team Jarl. I know some people are on Team Jarl, and you know what? We can still be friends, listeners. If you are Team Jarl, that's fine. But I am on Team Jarl, so
I'm on
that's
Team
the thing.
Yarl.
Okay, all right, we're good. We're in agreement. All right, Julie, we can still be friends and keep making
We can
content
still be
together.
friends, I
So,
guess.
everyone, you will remember Julie from the Dark Star theory that we co authored, that was mostly
Yes.
her ideas, and I helped her look for some evidence, helped with some editing, and we had an amazing discussion about that. So, if you have not heard me read that essay, that's actually a separate episode from our discussion because that was before I was having guests on. So, I had to bring her back later and have her as a guest. So, please listen to our Dark Star discussion. We talk about the Dornish plot, Duran, Ariane, and of course, our favorite emo guy, Darkstar. So we had a really good time in
Absolutely.
that discussion. I'm so glad to have you back, Julie. So this was really fun to write. What made you want to write a letter to Jon and let him know our feelings?
Exactly. I just thought that John in A Dance with Dragons was, making so many really good, big-hearted decisions, but just, kept kept ignoring sort of some of his instincts and obviously some of the threats that he was facing. He kept sort of putting them off, or like we said in our essay, giving people platitudes or not quite explaining his position, or
Yeah.
yeah. And so actually I got the idea from our Valar Revitas.
Da, da, da. If you're not listening to History
Yes,
of Westeros or watching them live, you are missing out. Check out Ashay and Aziz, please.
you're missing out. And so during Valar Revitas, we're in A Dance with Dragons. And so, as you know, each week we go through like a series of chapters, like 3 to 4 chapters. And I kept noticing that during the John chapters, we would all be discussing in some way, shape, or form, when we got to a John chapter, the trappings of power.
Yes.
And,
That's a
that,
huge theme in the fifth book and the series overall,
yes,
but especially in Jon and Dany's storyline as well.
especially. And, the frustrations that people had with John, just, ignoring with good reason, Melisandre, and some of her warnings. He has good reason to ignore her and not believe her, right?
Yes.
I mean, she's a sorceress. She often doesn't, you know, read the fire correctly or interpret the fire correctly or communicate what she sees in the fire correctly or overestimates what she sees. There's a lot of ground to plow there, right? On Melisandre's wonderful gift, but her inability to, correctly interpret what she's seeing. But the point is, John kept making these series of, small, um, misunderstandably under, understandably mistakes, right? Because he is young,
Yes.
especially about his, mantle of leadership, right? He is young to be trained as a leader and to have this much responsibility. And
Absolutely. Like
as we
we
kept
also need to
talking
remember
about,
in a Game of Thrones, the book, he's what, 14 when he makes that
yes, he's
decision,
so young.
and his uncle Benjen tells him you don't know what you're giving up. And then he meets Ingrid and he finds out what he's giving up.
Oh,
So
uh,
we do really have him growing up and being a leader at the same time, and that's a lot of responsibility to put on a kid.
that's a lot. It is.
So
It's a lot.
I hope that with this letter that you and I did, Julie, that we kind of had some empathy for him, but also kind of said the parts that we thought needed to be said about how John can improve. This is his report card, and some things need improvement.
Some things need improvement, but I kept trying to figure out what I would want to say to him and um, get out some of my frustrations because I found myself, like many readers, just frustrated with not just John, but the situation that he's in and, wishing things would go better for him because he just is facing, enormous responsibilities and decisions,
Yeah.
and many of them are going horribly bad. The free folk, the White Walker threat, it's so much coming at him. Um, and, you know, I don't know that there is a successful way to thread that needle between the Night's Watch and the free folk. They are just, born and bred to be enemies. I don't know that there is even a, player, a Game of Thrones player who could have been successful. Um,
Yeah, it certainly takes a master of diplomacy that we
right.
don't really see in the
We don't
in the whole
really see
series.
it. Yeah, we don't
Um,
see it.
And I think that George did this to make us sympathetic to his cause for letting in the free folk, and in some ways to be a little bit, I don't want to be too empathetic, but a little bit empathetic with the people that assassinated him, because this goes against everything that they think they believe in and that they should be fighting for. And
Right.
so I think we do see both sides in the fifth book, but I think more than anything, and this is something we're going to definitely talk later about what didn't make it into the essay, and one thing that didn't make it in for me that I kind of wanted to say, but it kind of seemed counterintuitive, is this is also just cuz the plot, right? He needed to be stabbed, so he had to piss people off.
Yeah.
Sometimes the plot is not a great reason, but that is just also another reason that he was killed, because George wanted it. That was where the plot was headed. He wanted this death of the hero and probably resurrection. We've got, frankly, we've got some Jesus stuff going on here. He's supposed to
Yes.
die for their sins and then come back. And I'm just going to pop this up here because this is some amazing Sanri art. And she gave us permission to use this because she
It's
is
so
amazing. And please
gorgeous.
check out Sanrixian. She has this beautiful drawing of Book John. And I think what I like about this picture, Julie, is his eyes. He looks like he's aged so much in like
Yes.
what, barely a year ish of leadership. And so I think Sanrixian, those of you that are watching on YouTube can see this. Sanrixian, I think, really captures that melancholy that John feels in book 5.
Yes. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous image of John. I completely agree about the melancholy, just the look on his face. It's it almost reminds me of like the Mona Lisa, because it's not a smile or a smirk. It's like resignation,
Mm-hmm.
you know. It's like so she's an amazing artist. I don't know how I'm just in awe of her skill that she was able to capture that melancholy and
Absolutely. And I'm
resignation.
definitely going to have links to Sanrixian's website. And we have another amazing artist to talk about later in the episode. But I just wanted to pop that up there because I'm pretty sure I'm going to make that the thumbnail of the YouTube video. So I just wanted to give her a shout out. And of course, in the description, she will be credited for that. But thank you, Sanri, for letting us use that. I just think that it works really well for the video. And it's also the featured picture for the essay on my blog because it
Yeah.
has that look. The other picture we're going to look at is he looks a little bit more encouraging and happy. I think a little bit, not much because it's John, but I think that picture really does show that he has that sternness and that strength kind of the Stark, but he's been beaten down and literally stabbed in the back.
Yes.
So I really like that about it. So that's, we wanted to say what we wanted to say to John, basically, and we did it this kind of letter form, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that was also, you've heard of like a Dear John letter, so we kind of riffed off of that.
Yes.
Um, so we were laying our heart on our sleeve, laying it all out to bear. So
But we're
what are
not quite breaking up with John.
we're not breaking up with John. We're just letting him know that he's in the doghouse.
Exactly.
But what are some things that we thought he did well in his leadership, and specifically, obviously, the 5th book?
I mean, I think letting the free folk through the wall is and getting Tormund, to come down with like his band was a good decision. And it was difficult, right? Like he had to sort of conspire to get Val to leave and get her to go on this trip for him. There was a lot to manage and a lot of moving parts there. I mean, but it's the right decision. I mean,
Yeah.
they're people, they're
Yeah.
humans.
And they're also
Yeah.
Westerosi. It's not like a separate race or anything. It's just the wall was just built, and if you were on the wrong side of it, tough luck, and that's not great. It's not like, for example, I wrote an essay and have a video about the Great Wall of China and the wall. Like the Great Wall of China was built and Chinese were on one side, and the steppe peoples, who are any mix of Mongolians, Khitan, Tartars, etc., were on the other side. There was already a bit of a cultural barrier, but this is not the case with the wall in the north. They were, they do, some of them do kind of know the old tongue and everything because they've been separated culturally, but there wasn't necessarily this type of cultural barrier. Northerners were much like wildlings when that wall
Yes.
went up. So it
Yes.
it should have been built to keep out the others, but it shouldn't have been built to keep out people. And that's John realizes that.
Wouldn't it be interesting, like, to go back to that time when the wall was built? I was so hoping, with that first announced prequel, like Moonblood, that they would talk about the building of the wall. So I know that's been canceled, but I'm still like so
Yeah,
anxious. I want to
Bloodmoon
be there for that.
did
I want to
sound
view.
interesting. It's just so
Yeah,
hard when George hasn't written much, and a lot of it is because it is supposed to be ancient history
I
in
know.
the timeline. So obviously,
But that would be fascinating,
that would
wouldn't
be
it?
fascinating. Yeah,
I,
it definitely
I,
would.
yes, I love that
And to
John,
see the Casterly's ruling,
yes,
Casterly Rock would have been cool too. It would have been neat, maybe if they did some Land the Clever stuff. So yeah, I did have.
yeah,
I look. my last name is Blackfire because I'm interested in the Blackfire rebellions. I'm not a Blackfire loyalist. I love the Targaryens. So in general, and learning about the Blackfire rebellion. So I was pumped when we got Hot D, and it's not House of the Dragon. It's always going to be Hot D for me. Anyway, when we got Hot D, I was excited.
Hot tea.
But Blood Moon would have been cool because I'm going to have a video soon about the Bloodstone Emperor. I am interested in, in this like Azor Ahai, this kind of old timeline stuff, and when things became what we know them now. The five
Yeah.
forts of ET were built after the Long Night, so the wall and the five forts, to see those kind of erected would have been really interesting. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I understand they didn't have the course material there. But yeah, so it was a right decision
It
to
was a
have the
right
free folk.
decision. I agree.
Um,
I agree. And it's
and
funny because even though it's still a right decision, or I think it's a correct decision, I don't think he properly managed the um, downflow of that decision, like the pushback from the Night's Watch, which is, he it's understandable pushback. He knows that there's been, fighting with the free folk. He knows that Bowen Marsh was almost killed at a fight in the gorge, right? He knows that when Alistair Thorne, when he sends Alistair Thorne north of the wall, he may not come back, and he might not get killed by walkers, like because the free folk might kill him. Like he is well aware of the danger that the free folk pose, but
yes.
the bigger picture is, at the very least, it's self-preservation. They're not going to be. It's less people to come back, in the army of the dead.
Yeah, and he realizes that anyone left north of the wall is just one more white to fight. Hey, that rhymed.
Exactly.
So
Ah,
that's really smart of Jon, is to and is to realize that the threat of the others is more than the threat of quote unquote wildlings, who you'll notice we use free folk in the essay, except for one time we do use wildlings. But he sees them as people, as free folk, because he was among them for a while, and he, like he says, he lied with one of them, lay with one of them. So
yeah.
he became a little more integrated. And I think integration is actually something I think he does well. We have the Alice
He does that
Karstark
so
marriage,
well.
right? Having her
Yes.
married, and that's going to assure that the Carhold doesn't fall into the wrong hands, right? And it also integrates some of the free folk into it. It is of note that it's the quote, I hate to use this term, but quote unquote more civilized of them. It is the tribes that have a leader and everything. So it's not,
Yeah.
obviously the free folk are not a monolith, and I don't mean to say that they are. It's by having the Alice Karstark marriage, you are getting some of them to be integrated into Carhold because of that.
Yes.
But obviously
Absolutely.
not all of them, because they have their different tribes and their different kind of sections and groups going on.
It's funny that you say that because, that makes me think that, culturally, if you look back at John's arc, he was a Northman, a Stark, right? Then he joins the Night's Watch. He does culturally assimilate a little bit to the Watch, but he wasn't really there that long, right? And then he goes off to the Fish of the First Men, and then
Yes.
gets with Corran. And I think had Corran stuck around, I feel like John would have been, Night's Watch for life, bro. And
That's what's
and
for
like
life,
fully
bro. They
drunk the
are a little bit
Kool-Aid.
like a frat. Like, let me be honest. Let's watch a little bit like a frat sometimes. The way
Yes,
they're like,
but
night, yeah, we made vows, woo, get tattoos.
yes, but then he goes off to be with Manson Ygritte.
Yes.
And then I think during that time, I think, either because that was a time in his life when he was sort of forming as a human, because he's a young teenager.
Mhm.
But I think he does culturally assimilate with the free folk, right? More so than he did with his Night's Watch brothers. And he is still judgy about his Night's Watch brothers, let's be honest, right?
Yeah, he does have and they show that. I think we see that more in the books than in the show, just because we get his POV. He does have this superiority complex very early on in the Night's Watch, and
Yeah.
a part of that is him growing up. But I think as Lord Commander, he still kind of has that, honestly, in the fifth
I
book.
I agree. I think he slightly favors the free folk, and he probably understands them better, right? He's honestly spent more time with them, and has a really strong bond with Tormund that I think is great. But it's like we say in our essay, like, after you get the pink letter, you spend all this time, or at least a couple of hours, like planning with Tormund. But
Hmm.
he just missed the opportunity to, like, bring set up a quick round table,
Yeah.
pull your team together, set up a round table, like, emulate some of the uh um characteristics of someone like, Tywin at a war council, or Ned in a war council. They would always let, everyone talk. And, in our letter to John, we're like, hey, maybe a better idea would have presented itself if you would have,
Opened it up.
called a meeting with,
Yeah.
yeah, include Tormund, but
And then at
include,
least people would feel like they were included in the final decision, you know?
yes, people would have felt like they were included. And maybe it would have been someone else's idea for John to go to, Winterfell. But I just feel like that decision, like, of John just saying, the Night's Watch will make for Hardhome. I
Yeah.
ride to Winterfell. He's no longer including himself in the they of the Night's Watch at that point, right?
Yeah, and that's a small grammatical thing, but it makes a difference, especially for people that already were essentially plotting to kill him.
For exactly. I mean, he's just given them the reason to do it by saying, I ride to Winterfell, the Night's Watch will make for Hardhome. That's a separation. And I
Yes.
think, and it's more than just grammar.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
and you
it's
know George, he
yeah.
never there's not a single sentence that has not been thought out. And this is not to say
Yeah.
like, oh, he's some god of writing, but I mean, he's vastly
He
superior
is a
to a
god of
lot
writing,
of
let's be
authors.
clear.
Well, and a lot of people complain about how long he takes. That's because every like he wants you to reread. Every sentence has been planned out. And so you were talking a little bit earlier about this idea of spending more time with the wildlings. One thing that I noticed that I just thought about, I made a note to myself while you were talking because I wanted to make sure that I said it, is that
Oh, cool.
he seems to have a disillusionment with the Night's Watch because he sees that people of higher birth are favored. It isn't this, oh, your past and your family is wiped away. It's very obvious that, your station and your birth is still important. And then he goes and he sees the wildlings. And you know what? They're genuine. They don't pretend to be anything that they're not. He
Exactly.
definitely sees that with Egret, right? And she obviously tells him, especially when it comes to when she talks about, oh, you're bowing. This is so fake. You don't actually have this, like, love of your lord. You just don't want to be punished, right? So
Right.
the free folk, hence free, right? They are free to be themselves. They don't have to put on airs. And he sees that the Night's Watch is just another version of Westerosi putting on airs. And this idea of, oh, if you go to the Night's Watch, your crimes are gone and this and that. And that's not true. Satin is still treated like a sex worker,
Yep.
and murderers are still treated like scum. So it doesn't do what it says it does, whereas the free folk, they tell you who they are up front and they stick to it.
And they stick to it. Yeah. That's a really interesting point. And I almost wonder if he found some freedom in that, or at least from, the best bastard, phrase that keeps coming up around him, and he has such a complex about that. So I wonder if he was able to, like, psychologically sort of set that aside, because, in the free focus, I mean, everyone's a bastard, right?
Yeah.
Almost. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just it's way more common. Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's funny that the thing that we, like about John so much is, his big heart, and he is pragmatic in a lot of ways, right? Because that's a very pragmatic decision to make, even if it's, not going to be popular with the
Hmm.
Night's Watch.
Yeah.
But the other thing that just, I didn't understand, but liked Melisandre's take on it, was when he refused the tail in the trappings of power, when Melisandre
Yes, and
says,
his quarters as well, where he's
yes,
sleeping. I mean,
and his
and this, we're not
quarters.
saying with this letter that if he would have done all these things that he wouldn't have been stabbed. It's just that he would
Right.
have at least demanded some respect.
He would have demanded some more respect. And that's kind of a thread through here, right? Like he refuses a tale.
Hmm.
Um and I think that Melisandre's call is right, is that, it's a form of pride for him. And, but it shouldn't be a form of pride. It should be a form of empowerment, right? And it just would have made him more serious in other people's eyes. And I don't think that he, fully um, wore the mantle of power because, look at the other powerful leaders in Westeros. Like Tywin is always a great example of that, right? Like there is no way that Tywin would ever accept nothing than the best available chamber or the
Yes.
best of, the best
Yeah, and
available
people,
spot.
yeah, and
Yeah.
people fear and begrudgingly respect the Lannisters, right?
Right.
And that's why Tyrion gets Braun, gets like all of these things in his life. And we obviously see in the fifth book, Tyrion realizes without that Lannister last name, he's going to be treated just like a common folk, and specifically as a dwarf. Unfortunately,
Right.
there is
What a
prejudice
rude awakening.
in yeah,
Exactly.
Planetos. Uh, so I think that's really interesting here is that but like with I think Tyrion and Jon are similar in that even when Jon goes to the Night's Watch and he doesn't have that kind of he never had the Stark name technically, but he was known as a Stark bastard, right?
Yeah.
And I hate to use that word, illegitimate born Stark. He
Yes.
when he loses that, he still kind of has a little bit, like we were saying earlier, of a superiority complex. And Tyrion has the same thing in Essos when he has to escape after killing his father.
That's
So
such a good take.
yeah, we do see a parallel there between them, but otherwise, I don't think they have that much in common. But that's definitely one thing they have in common.
That is such a good take. But don't you think that, like, I feel like even Tyrion would have, bossed people around
Oh my God,
more?
Tyrion would have been the shortest tyrant.
Yes.
Tyrion would have tier tyrant. That's what I'm going for. Like,
It would have been
yeah,
go send 20 men
he would have
to
been like,
repair Lord
yeah,
Mormont's chambers. Go
exactly.
fix that
No,
staircase.
and he there was originally this idea that he might have been sent to the wall. So like what could have been if Tyrion actually had legitimately been sent to the wall? That's actually kind of an AU I've been thinking about. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
he would have been like, I want the nicest quarters. I want a bajillion servants and yeah, I want that. So there
exactly. And that's okay. That is almost your duty as the leader, is to, you know, uh say what you want and command it to be done. That is the way of this world that they live in, right? And so I think by not doing that and by accepting what's available rather than making something else available, he just didn't seize the opportunity to, fully establish himself as, I'm the Lord Commander.
yeah.
If I want another place to sleep, I get to tell people I want another place to sleep. Go make it happen.
I think some of this is actually John having some imposter syndrome. As a female grad student, I can relate. You kind of feel like you're in a position that you know in the back of your mind that you earned it, but you still feel wrong. You still feel like I still feel like the ghost of JR of LC JR Mormont is there. He's kind of
I
like
bet you're right.
I this isn't where I pictured myself right now. Maybe like 10 years from now, if that. But he did
Yeah,
not expect this to happen. And even though he knows in the end that he is the best man for the job, he needed more years of
he
training.
did.
And we
He
say
did
that
need
in the
more
letter that
years.
he needed more of LC Mormont giving him instruction and showing him through multiple scenarios and examples what good leadership means. So I think there's some imposter syndrome going on John's
I bet
part.
I bet you're right. I bet you're right completely. And I bet that it's funny because I think John, as probably one. is in Donald Noy's chambers because they had mutual kinship, friendship, respect. Jon felt close to Donald Noy. So I get why he's doing it. I mean, maybe this is Jon just expressing this is what I can take right now. This is
Yeah.
what I can deal with as a, this is what my brain can take right now is I get that's you want to be close to Donald Noy, someone that maybe he even thinks of as uh maybe an equal, right?
Yeah.
Or at least an equal in terms of if Donald Noy was still alive, he'd probably have been elected LC, right? So maybe Jon does view Donald as foots to follow, but
Hmm.
that's not the case. Like, but that you're not the armorer, Jon. You're the Lord Commander. I just wish he had um acted more the Lord, while he had that title.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
there are a couple of we've talked about a lot of decisions. There are definitely two decisions that I want to talk about, one of which we addressed and one of which we didn't. So I'll give
Mm,
you option, Julie, which one you want to talk about first. First
I'm
of
intrigued.
all, why choose satin? Was that a good option? And then the baby swap.
Ooh,
Yeah, was that okay?
awesome.
Was well, yeah. So which one would you like to address first,
But
Julie?
dealer's choice. Let's go with Satin.
Okay.
So Satin, who I love.
I love satin so much. Look, and
Yeah.
I'm not a shipping person, but I ship Jatin. I'm sorry. Like I just want John
You're
and
down.
Satin to get together. And look, okay, look, I'm
At
bi,
least
and the way
once.
that John thinks about Satin kind of reads a little bi to me, but that might be because I like doing queer reading of fantasy. But anyway, that's it
Hmm.
beside the point. Let's talk about him choosing Satin as his steward.
I think
Or
that's such an interesting decision. I think that's another example of Jon making the decision based on who he personally likes and respects,
yeah, he was
or
comfortable
or
with.
or who, yeah, exactly, who he's comfortable with and wants to spend time with, and who frankly needs a steward job, right? Satin, remember during the battle at the wall, I think he was in I think it was the tower with Jon shooting arrows, right? And he's not the infantry, right? He's not the soldier. So he needed a steward job. And so I love Jon for that decision, and giving Satin a job to which he is, uh, like Sam
Yeah.
can do for the wall. He can be productive. People being productive and having a job that they can perform is a great sense of pride for the person doing that. So in that case, it's a great decision. And it does protect Satin from some of the more bitchy, you know, he was a prostitute,
Yeah,
eye
the
rolling,
violence
and
that yeah, the
yes,
violence that would be I mean,
yeah,
unfortunately, as a sex worker, I believe in Old Town, if I remember correctly. Not super sure about that, but as a sex worker, I'm sure he saw his share of violence, and then he comes to the wall, and then he's still judged for it and
yes.
faces the threat of violence. Which, if you are a Low the Links fan, please check out their essay about Alaris and Sorella and how their cross dressing is actually a lot of that is the unfortunately opening them up to the threat of violence. So we have any
Oh,
type of transgression, and Low the Links they do some really amazing queer readings and gender analysis of Song of Ice and Fire, that they talk a lot about how any transgression in a lot of societies, and let's just take Westeros obviously as our example. Any transgression is met with violence and verbal, and both verbal and physical. So
oh, I
we see
can't
how
wait to read
Satin
that.
is yeah, we see how Satin is really threatened with the possibility of violence, and even just what people are saying about it. I mean, he's a brother of the Night's Watch too, but they treat him like an outsider. They treat him like something filthy and ruined and disgusting. And that's something that he,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because of what the work that he had to do. He is open. Himself has been open to that. I did want to say one thing though about this idea of picking him as steward is that while he was a good pick for Jon, as far as Jon wanting someone he can trust and such, especially because it's so hard to find someone you can trust in his current position. The problem with that is that when we learn from Jon being named Mormont steward, at first he gets pissy about it. He's mad about it. And then Sam is like,
Yep.
oh, that's because he's grooming you for leadership. So anyone
Yes.
else's steward or any other steward, Satin could have been. But the Lord Commander steward is being groomed for leadership. We know that directly
Yep.
from the text. So to have Satin, who doesn't really present martial or leadership qualities necessarily, as Lord Commander Jon Snow's steward, is not a good choice. If Jod was
I
just, a
agree.
leader in the Night's Watch, but not necessarily the Lord Commander, it would not matter. But
Right.
the Lord Commander steward in the text, it tells us that he is supposed to be the next in line, essentially.
Yes. I completely agree. Jon has made the decision that he's sort of comfortable with and that he can handle, but once again, this decision has another side to it, which means he's not doing succession planning, right? By
Yeah.
picking Satin as a steward, that's fine as a steward, but as a successor to you, Jon, that's probably not gonna go over well, and he hears that it doesn't go over well from the other from the other folks in the Night's Watch. So just one more example of Jon, not quite fully thinking through his role and his responsibility. Like honestly, he's responsible now for grooming the next Lord Commander, right? It's just like when you become the king or the queen and you have a kid, that's your responsibility is to groom them for, taking over. And I don't see him doing that with Satin, although he's giving him employment and productive employment. It doesn't appear that he's grooming him. So
Yeah, and Mormont,
that's a bad on Jon.
when Mormont picked Jon Snow, that was not necessarily a unanimously accepted decision either. There were people that didn't like Jon and didn't like that he was in basically the VP position, if you will.
Right.
So, but Mormont was in a position where he demanded respect, and he had those, like we talk about in our letter to Jon. He had those trappings of power that said, "I don't give a crap if you don't like this, this Jon Snow, because I'm going to pick him." And
Yep.
Jon Snow did not set up that same, way to then say, you know what, I don't care if you don't like Satin because I picked him and I see something in him that you don't, and I'm your Lord Commander, so shut up and
Yep.
accept it. He just didn't set that up. So I'm gonna while we're talking, I'm gonna throw up this second artwork if you're watching on YouTube by Vanessa Cole. And this
That's
is Book
so
John, and he's
beautiful.
holding, of course, Longclaw with the white wolf's head, or
That
hilt,
art
pardon
is
me.
gorgeous.
It
Good
is
job,
really
Vanessa Cole.
absolutely Vanessa Cole. She really does this kind of colored pencil style that I love, and I love how the fur is so detailed. You can see like every little,
Every little hair
little
stands
hair of
out.
fur. And I think also his expression too has that stark sternness. Like this just looks like a stark.
Yes,
And so I
absolutely.
love this. So Vanessa Cole, please check her out. I will have the links in the description. Once again, an amazing fandom artist, and thank you again, Vanessa, for letting us use this. We really loved this piece as well, and I think also the look here is also it's a little determined, but I feel that it's also a little resigned, which is exactly what I feel from Jon in the fifth book.
Agreed. Definitely resigned. So what else did we think about but not include in our letter
Yeah,
to John?
something that I struggle with is the baby swap, whether or not it was a good idea or the right
The
idea.
baby swap. Oh my
Because
goodness.
either way, a kid is in danger, and it's just a question of whose kid. And I don't like, look, the Lord Commander has to make a lot of really hard decisions. Mormont did, all the Lord Commanders before him did, and Jon has to. But this decision, really haunts me. I know these are all
Yes.
fake characters and fictional characters, but it really haunts me because either way, you basically are putting a child in danger, whether it's Mance Rayder's child or Gilly's. And I just, it breaks my heart that he had to do this in the first place. And God dang it, Melisandre, stop burning people. It's like, first of all, but then second of all, yeah, this idea that he would have to make this decision, and we see Gilly, it's going to affect her for the rest of her life. He's scarred that poor woman who has done nothing wrong and is a wonderful character. Anyway, the baby swap, like what?
The baby swap. I'm
Wow.
so conflicted on the baby swap. I mean, I think where's my wind vein of feeling today? Because I'm so conflicted on that. But you know what always messes with my feelings here is that I love that chapter when we
Yeah.
get it from uh both. I love that chapter and those scenes that we get from both Sam and John's perspective. How that decision around the baby swap
Yes.
is sort of broken up between like feast and dance, and we get one chapter from Sam and one chapter from John, and so that's so glorious.
Yeah, and I
um
like it because Sam looks at it, and if I remember right, and it's been a while since I've done a reread, but if I remember right, Sam is kind of looking at John and thinking like, how could he do this? So he's so unemotional, and then we get John's POV and dance. He's really really torn about this.
he is just eaten up by this decision, and the writing that you know that George uses there when he has John like even stop his thoughts, like where he was going to say, I was going to ask, but then he just changes he changes his thought pattern like mid sentence, and he's like, you will take one child, and it will be it will be Mance's child. It won't be yours.
Yeah.
Right. Like how he just interrupts his own thought pattern. And so my appreciation is for, if you're going to do that, John, then I think you did it right, because that's not the thing you ask. That's the thing you demand, and you have to say, otherwise they'll both be dead. So I think I'm so proud of the way John did that. That's cojones, right? That's
Yeah.
he was
That
standing
is him
owning
owning
it
his
that day.
decisions, and whether or not Julie and I necessarily agree with that decision, you've got to stand by it, because if you show any consternation, oh, I'm not sure, hesitation, that's really opening yourself up for trouble.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you'd never get someone to agree to leaving their child unless it was the you know the think of this horrible death by fire, right?
Yeah.
Think about, Melisandre will absolutely burn this child. Like, she will burn this baby for King's blood. Like, that is horrific, right? You have to plant that horrific thought into Gilly's mind, or she just wouldn't do it. So on the one hand, you know I love the writing so much there, and the story that's told so much there. But
Yeah. And it's a
um
brilliant example of George's POV structure. And this is one of the many
yes,
examples of how seeing the same scene through different POVs can really give you a different perspective on them.
yeah. I think at the end of the day, I think I'm of two minds. I think the decision was right when he made it, but will it turn out to be needed? I doubt it.
Hmm. Interesting.
Just because I
Yeah.
don't I
So
don't
you think
think.
that Melisandre's just going to move on to Shireen, and she's going to not even like, not even care about this baby? Or do you like
I think that
predictions for tell us what you think will happen in
predictions.
Winds of Winter, Julie. Come on.
Oh
But I'm saying, like, do you think the fate of this child is going to be what John thinks it is?
no, I don't. I mean, Mance Raider's child is now on his way to Old Town, right? Or at the Citadel, right? and Gilly's child of Craster's son is at the wall. So that so Jon did take away the utility of that, right, for Melisandre. If her goal is King's blood, she can't access it right now, right?
Hmm.
Um, so maybe that accelerates the or becomes the reason that she chooses Shireen if in fact that's what's needed. I sort of think that um, only death can pay for life. So I think there's gonna have to be a death for Jon to come back. And I think it's possible that it's Shireen.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about that. I've always seen the death of Shireen, which is going to happen, Stannerman. Just accept it. Anyway, and he's going to agree to it. It's not going to be, anyway, I don't want to get in that. But I've always thought of it as the tale of George has talked about the tale of Agamemnon, who his daughter said they basically it's a I believe a Greek myth, and his daughter they were on a boat and they needed wind, and the daughter said, kill me and you will have wind and you can make it. And so I've always seen it as there's a crazy snowstorm happening, and
Yeah.
and a lot of fans have talked about this. This is not my original thought, but that then he would sacrifice Shireen so that they could basically win the Battle of Winterfell,
I
essentially.
mean, that's more poetic, right? And that's like they did in the TV show. It's more poetic to have Stannis it's more tragic and poetic, to have Stannis make the choice to sacrifice Shireen. Um, you know, I'm just looking at sort of the tools in the toolbox available to Melisandre for Kingsblood, and
Yeah,
that's a pretty short list.
it could
I don't know
happen
that
though that
Kingsblood is needed, but that's a pretty
yeah.
short list. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It could happen that Melisandre some mystical way finds out that this kid is not going to work, and then says, "Well, you said you needed X, Stannis. You
Yeah.
only have one option, and it's your own daughter."
Well,
Um,
you know, right. There are people more read in on the different types of magic and resurrection magic that get used in the story. Um, like Thoros doesn't need a sacrifice, right? To keep bringing back Beric. I mean, he does it over and over again. So there may not even be a sacrifice that's needed, but for some reason,
I
um,
wonder that because, we get undead Cat who needed Beric to die. So I really wonder about the first time that Beric died, that very first
yeah,
time, if someone else didn't die right when when Thoros was giving the kiss of life. I don't know. That's just
maybe,
my head canon.
yeah,
Like they said that there was this, the first time that he quote unquote died. Like I just wonder if there was someone else around him who was dying when that happened. There has to
maybe,
I just think that it's a pretty set law that death has to pay for life. Like and there's also the alchemic law of, you must sacrifice something in order to get the the change that you want. You want something to turn into
yeah.
gold, you have to sacrifice something. So, but I don't know, maybe we haven't gotten I don't think we've gotten the full story on Barrick's first death.
I don't think we have. And on Jon's, I'm completely convinced that Jon is going to be resurrected. But for some reason, my brain always goes to maybe because we know that Jon and Dany are reflective of each other in a lot of ways. So for some reason, when I think of Jon's resurrection, I think of Dany's birth in the fire. Of her. It's not a resurrection, but it was a similar and the Ms. Mary Dur.
Mary Masdor, yeah.
Thank you. You know, for some reason, that early Game of Thrones, or I guess it was the last chapter in the first book, that scenario to me just seems like it will repeat in some way, shape, or form for Jon. They're
Yeah,
burning.
because you
Yeah.
you had Mary die, and then Danny and George has said specifically that was a miracle. And I think that Jon Snow's resurrection is also going to be a miracle. And I think in the world, on Planetos, if you will, that a miracle needs certain things to come into place at the right time, and I think a sacrifice is one of those things, one of those
Yeah.
kind of uh, aspects, or I can't think of the word. Um,
Yeah.
but what it's like a recipe, right? That's one of the ingredients,
Yes.
basically.
It's needed to bake the cake. But that
I'm
the
hungry.
idea of Shireen, yes, the idea of Shireen, though, I don't know that it's actually likely. I'm trying to think of like what else is available. Like Celeste I don't think would part with Shireen, and so
I think that Celise
unless,
is becoming
yeah,
an increasing zealot, and so I think that her religious zealotry will take her a long way. And then, kind of like what they showed in the show, realize that,
oof,
oh crap, I've drank
wow,
I drank
that is
the
strong
Flavor Aid.
Kool-Aid.
And those of you that know that reference, yes, I am obsessed with Colts. It was actually Flavor Aid, not Kool Aid, at Jonestown. That's your the more you know from Amy Blackfire.
I've been served.
Just yay! I know way too much. I'm super into true crime and cults. So yeah, something you didn't know about me,
Exactly.
listeners. There you go, learning about Amy every day. Um, so yeah, those are the main decisions I wanted to talk about. Julie, what other that we can continue on this idea of kind of sacrifice, but is there also something that you wanted to talk about around surrounding John's storyline, especially in the fifth book?
I mean, just the idea of, John as a leader, right? And I think another sort of thread is like the missed opportunities to demonstrate that leadership,
Hmm.
either by things that we've talked about already, which is, giving more orders to create the world that you want, and but whether it's new places to sleep, new chambers, um or
Yeah, and ghosts too. That's something we talked about, right?
and
Like, if you
ghost,
just have a
and
freaking big ass
why
dire wolf following
on
you,
earth,
yeah.
why on like pound my
And what
fist.
reality was that a good idea? You know?
Baroque. So here comes Baroque, right? Here comes Baroque. He's opening friendly because he's like brother, right? I
Hmm.
love that it's a friendly opening, right? That is a great. It says equal, not quite friend, but it's respectful, right? It's a
Yeah.
good opening, and so it's recognition of a kindred spirit, I think, and from on Baroque's part toward John. So it's not animosity, right? So whatever else it is, it's not hate. So why John didn't immediately uh, capture that and then
Yeah.
say, listen here, I got this wolf, you got this boar, they're not going to get along. This is a shit show waiting to happen. Will you please take your boar wherever the heck you can, or keep him penned up? And if, you start with friendly, but if it gets like that, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to insist that keep that boar under lock and key, because you know what? I'm the Lord Commander and I walk around with my dire wolf,
Yeah, there's
right?
only room for one more at
There's,
this
there's a,
at the wall.
like, I'm it.
I
I'm
mean,
the
and here's the
LC
thing with
here.
Ghost. Are you ready for a pun, Julie? If it ain't Baroque, don't fix it. I mean, you got
Ah, good
Ghost following you,
one.
John, and it's worked well as far as intimidating people throughout
Yeah.
all the whole series.
You make
And
people adjust to
we see what
you.
happens when they are separated. Think about what happened at the Red Wedding, like R.I.P. You had
Yes.
Grey Wind locked up. That was one of the first things that they wanted at the wedding. And of course, they had an excuse. Oh, it's a wedding. He's a beast, whatever. But think about, when Lady was killed and how that crushed Sansa's spirit, and her Stark identity was kind of lessened. And
Yes.
and think about when Arya and Nymeria being separated. He's one of the, other than Summer and Bran, he's one of the few Starks with his wolf by his side. He should keep him there.
Yes. I mean, I know that he's listening to Tormund because he likes him, but Tormund's like the one guy with the idea at the moment, right? It doesn't mean you have to do what Tormund says. Like Tormund's position is to do the thing that is in the best interest of the free folk, right?
Yeah.
That's his perspective. Jon, your perspective is, this is my house. I own this wall. I own this castle. Therefore, you need to go lock up your boar because I roam around with my wolf.
Yeah. And I think
And
this might be
yeah,
another example of because the plot demanded it, right? Like
I know.
if his wolf were there, I don't think that the assassins would have been so gung ho about just going and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like Ghost would have been like, "Oh no, I'm gonna chomp your throats out." I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it would have at least intimidated them a little bit, but because they weren't there, I mean, because Ghost wasn't there, it really left him vulnerable.
it did. And that's that's very true because plot, right?
Cuz
So
plot.
they did it with Rob. They
That's my
separated
hot
him from
take,
his
everyone.
wolf.
All
Yep,
this happens cuz plot, which, not
because
really that
plot.
hot of a take. It's kind of how
Yeah,
literature works. Things happen because the plot demands it. So, but I always like when there's a better reason why, but I think some of these it is just cuz
yeah.
plot.
And the other thing I think is that Jon just didn't sell his ideas, or um wasn't didn't send out ambassadors, or you know really anything to sell his position on either why it's beneficial. There was no PR campaign, and
You need a PR team.
there should have
Yeah.
been,
Well,
I
and
mean,
we think about he also, speaking of PR, this is something we didn't talk about. I understand that Sam's got to go off and like learn to be a maester, but his greatest hype man is gone now. Like Sam was there to pump up Jon and to stick up for
yes,
him
yes,
during the elections, especially. I mean, he wouldn't have gotten elected
absolutely.
without Samuel Tarly.
And I
So
don't think he
he's sending
realized that.
everyone away. He's isolating himself, and I'm
Yes,
not. We're not blaming the victim here. We're not saying that Jon
no,
asked to be murdered. We're just saying he
we're
let
just saying.
anyone who could, or anything that could have protected him in one way or another, he sent away. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think he realized the value in that soft power that Sam had,
Absolutely, you got the
right?
hard power with Ghost, soft power with Sam. I mean, they were a dynamic duo.
And Maester Aemon, right? And Maester Aemon was always in
And that
Jon's
clout.
corner.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I think he did realize the soft power of Maester Aemon, and just the respect that he commanded among people of the Night's Watch, who would then just acquiesce to whatever, especially Maester Aemon would say. No one would acquiesce to whatever Sam was saying, right?
Yeah.
Not acquiesce, but they would. But Sam was persuasive, right? Especially about the election. So, I don't think Jon put those things together that, it is a pragmatic, and to me, it was an okay decision. Sam becoming a maester is awesome.
Yeah.
But, Jon, did you realize that by doing that, you're sending away your two best ambassadors? That's your PR campaign that's gone now, right? And I don't think he realized how much um, work, unpaid labor,
Yeah.
how much unseen, sort of that you sent away your communications team, and you're in a
Yeah.
crisis.
And
And
I do
so,
think that Gilly also could have been a great ambassador between him and the free folk. And I think that this is a little bit of I'm going to come out and say it. I think it's a little bit of misogyny on Jon's part to only see her as a caretaker of the kids rather than possibly a representative of the free folk. Even though she was
what
one
a
of
great
Craster's
point.
daughters, and I will not use the term wife because
Yes,
it
that's
was
too
sexual
creepy.
assault, and I'm not using that word, especially as someone who is engaged. I'm not using that word because I'm not. It's nowhere near what wife means. But basically, she could, even though she was one of Craster's daughters, and therefore, they were prejudiced. Other free folk were prejudiced against her. At least she was one of them, and they would have recognized
Yeah,
that. So she could have had Sam, who was a brother of the Night's Watch, to to help him with the Night's Watch side, and then Gilly to help him with the Free Folk side. And he sent off both of
Exactly.
them, seeing Sam as just a guy who is good at books, which good on you, Sam, for being learned. But then also Gilly is just a mother, just a womb, and obviously as a feminist, I really can't stand that.
Yes. No. Excellent point. There are also now spear wives at I think Barrow Hall, and Iron Emmett's there, sort of having his fun, but that's another opportunity for Jon to sort of build a bridge.
Absolutely. Use those, basically, they're like Viking shield maidens, man. Use those shield maidens.
Exactly.
They're gonna kick butt.
Yeah.
And
So
man, there's, like we show with the Mormont ladies, there is nothing more protective than a mama bear. So,
exactly.
That's the thing, is like the
Exactly.
feminine energy of protection doesn't necessarily make it not martial. Protecting someone fiercely, it can be martial.
Exactly. It
Um,
certainly can be.
So,
Yeah.
that's just, I'll talk more about that in my video about yin and yang in the Song of Ice and Fire. But I do think that he has this very Seven Kingdoms Westerosi kind of idea of women, and he needs to be thinking a little bit more like a free folk when it comes to utilizing the women that surround him.
It's such a great point.
Not to
Women.
mention, we have brave Dany Flint. There has been a female member of the Night's Watch before, and she kicked butt until she was found out. And unfortunately,
Yes,
I'm
she
going to
did.
talk about that in my future episode. That was just terrible
Oh,
fate. But uh, you know, women can do it all. Is what I'm saying, Jon.
exactly. That's right, Jon.
It
Get
was
on
nice.
board.
It was nice to talk directly to him, Julie. Though this was really
It
cathartic,
was. Oh,
actually,
it
writing.
was.
I
I
didn't
thought
realize how
so.
much pent up rage
How
and
much
also empathy,
rage.
that I felt for him, that I wanted to get out as well.
That's why we have the rage, because we love him so much and we're so
Exactly, we're passionate.
pissed off he's dead.
And he's not one of my favorite POVs, but he is one of my favorite characters, if that makes sense. Like, I don't like being in his head, but I like him as a character, and I like the trope that he's doing, that George is doing, with this idea of the hidden prince, right? And he's kind of, I mean, everyone's kind
Yeah.
of says that this idea of subverting tropes is overdone, but George is an example of how that can be really awesome, and not just like, oh, I take it and I flip it. It's not that simplistic with George, and that's what I like about his writing.
Yeah. I agree. It is the hidden print story, but it was funny because to me it was like I didn't catch that, at least on my first read, that it was going to be Jon, right? I don't think it was until Rob was killed that I was like, oh goodness.
Yeah. And the take
Yeah.
that I have on the Prince That Was Promised / Azor Ahai is a take that a lot of fans have, which is the original Azor Ahai was a group of people, right? You hear about his friends. And I think that the future Azor, the one that we're going to get in the main series, is going to be Jon, Dany, maybe Tyrion, like a bunch of people. And that's something
Interesting.
that I'm going to actually have a future episode about, because I'm going to talk about Yu the Great, who is from Chinese mythology, who allegedly created engineering, basically, Yu the engineer, and he
Oh wow.
quelled the floods of the Yellow River. So this is when a lot of people say, "Oh, there's great flood myths in every culture. There must have been actually something that happened. That's the Great Flood myth in China, and Yu the Great quelled the floods." Well, most scholars argue, and I'm going to argue in my future essay and video. And I know I keep saying future essay and video, and there's like 20 of them. They will get done, I promise. But I'm going to
We
argue
believe
that just
you.
as Yu the Great was probably a team of people working together toward a common cause, I think that's what's going to happen with the fight with the others. And Jon is going to be just one of many princesses, and non-binary people that are promised.
I cannot wait to hear that. That sounds like a great essay. Yeah, because I'm so intrigued
I'm
about that.
excited for
The
that one, and
prince that was
it
promised.
always doesn't get many votes. So if you follow me on Twitter, listeners, I am known as Amy Poehler, Poller. I love to poll you, and so I asked, hey, which one should I do next? And every time the Azor Ahai Yu the Great thing, it's always the last place, and I'm like, guys, this is an interesting concept, but everyone's like, I want your Dany essay, I want your Cersei essay. I'm like, okay, fine.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like, it's always the last choice. But well, and even though I have the polls, I don't necessarily always heed them, though, because I think the Cersei essay didn't win, but I wanted to have Rohan
Mm.
on, So if you haven't checked out my Cersei discussion with Rohan, listeners, please do, because we get into it and it's fun.
Oh, I
Um,
can't wait.
but enough about that. Enough about my plugs that are not so subtly inserted into our discussion. Um, yeah, I think that with Jon, as this savior figure, with this kind of Azor Ahai Princess was promised figure, which in itself is murky, right? It
Yeah.
seems that Azor Ahai could have there's of course a theory in the fandom that Azor Ahai actually could have started the Long Night and actually been the bad guy, and then the prince that was promised stopped it, and they're actually two different people. Maybe they're the same person. You know how it is with ancient history, fictional ancient history. Um, but it's interesting
Interesting.
how like you said, I didn't catch it either on the first read. Those that say they did are
Yeah.
either really smart or lying. That they've figured that he was a Targaryen. But what I really like about that is that he has a leadership. He and Dany both have to learn leadership, and that's why there's a lot of parallels between them. She had to
Yes.
learn in Marine, just like he's having to learn at the Night's Watch. And so I suppose that's why I'm a little surprised that with the end of the show and most likely with the end of the series, we're going to get King Bran. It makes sense with the cripples, bastards, and broken things kind of thing going on. And this idea that even those that are you might think are weak can actually be strong and the best leaders. But I just thought because Dany and Jon have gotten so much firsthand leadership training that they would probably be the one to sit their butts on the Iron Throne. But
Yeah, I cannot wait, just like every other fan, cannot wait to see how this ends. We said the Iron Throne is his to lose or refuse, I believe. And so we'll
I
see what
don't want
happens.
it. Oh, sorry, that was my queen. I don't want it. Sorry, I just. But
That's a good
Julie,
impression.
themes are for eighth grade book reports. That's what D&D said. So apparently all of literary analysis doesn't matter.
Ah,
Sorry, I'm okay. It does matter. Anyway,
exactly.
themes
I
are a
can't.
big deal in A Song of Ice and Fire. I would not
Yes.
have this channel / podcast if they weren't. So yeah. Anyway, that's my
Yes.
my my regular dig at D&D not liking themes. Um, or at least one of them, whichever said it. But yeah, the kind of this theme of the hero and the fallen hero and the reluctant hero are very much at play in Jon's storyline.
Absolutely. Definitely at play. He's definitely the um I think he stands out to me as the reluctant hero. Because for some reason he always just seems, not quite shy, but just I think reluctance the perfect word. And that comes from his, sense of melancholy. Um, I think, frankly, for him to be successful, if he were to take the Iron Throne, he would need to be more wolfish, and he'd need to, learn these hard lessons about how difficult it is to, you know, manage the interests of vastly different groups of people, right?
Yeah.
And the kingdoms are often like that, right? There's, the reach in the north and they're vastly different. And so um I don't know that I can say John's made a success of his Lord Commandership so far.
Hmm.
Um Successful in some ways for sure. Um but you know, not successful in other ways. But the story thankfully is still untold, right? And
Yeah.
there's more for us to learn. You know, I look forward to John being a bit more wolfish, although what's funny about that is that I think I'll like him less.
Really, I think
Yeah,
I'm gonna like him more. So
yeah,
that's interesting. Oh, I can't wait. It would be great to talk to you if
yes.
and when we get wins and we can talk about that. Because my prediction is that I'm gonna like Wolf John more. Uh,
Okay.
just because he really annoyed me with the hesitation. But this kind of reminds me of this idea of what is the nature of power, which is a huge theme. Well, I love themes in George
Yes.
R. R. Martin series, which is that this idea that I think the way it was presented in the show of the best person to rule is the person that doesn't want it is actually way too simplistic of an expression of the theme that I think George is going for. I want to make it I want to look at it more nuanced. So it's not that, oh, I don't want it and therefore I deserve it. It's more that it's more that I'm sorry, I'm always gonna do it. I can't.
Good. I love it.
I have
I
a
love
good
it.
friend and I hope he's listening who hates when I say that because he actually likes season 8. I hope you're listening and I love you. Anyway, so
Mm.
the way it was presented in the show is if you don't want it, then that means, you deserve it. And I think that what George is hopefully, I believe, trying to go for is that those who want power for the sake of power, like Tywin and
Yeah.
like Cersei, and in some ways Dany, who is my favorite character in POV before the Dany stands get after me. Those that like kind of actively go out and grab power and then convince themselves it's for the greater good are not the ones you want in power. It's those who stand up and step up to the plate like Jon is gonna do when he comes back with the others. It's those that but don't necessarily do it because they know it will get them power. Those are the people that you want ruling, that are gonna do the job, but they're gonna
Yeah.
do it not because of the power that it will gain them, but because of the good that it will do. Rather than, it's like putting the horse before the cart with the way that many people in the books and the show do it, is that they do this thing so that they can get the power, whereas Jon is going to do this thing and then the power might result from it.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting. That take on power and who's ultimately good at wielding it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I because there's you know in those sort of monarchies, right? That's why we don't have a lot of them anymore, is because the fate of that country is then so often decided by the
Firstborn
um
son, which is not a
yeah
good system.
the firstborn son,
Or the
and
firstborn in Dorne. Yay.
yes, or the first, yes, go Dorn,
Yes, Dorne. We're definitely doing
yeah,
another Dorne episode, Julie, because I have to get back into
yes.
Dorne. I love
I
it. It's my
I
favorite of the
love
kingdoms.
Dorn. I love Dorn. And I like the north, and I love the north too. And I love that that's where John came from, right? But it's funny that you were talking about power because, like, to me, um, you know, the Starks are great at being the Starks and Winterfell,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
I don't know that we have any other evidence besides Cregan Stark for like 2 weeks when he flew down to be hands back in the olden days.
Yeah. When he came in and he was like, I'm here to take
Yeah.
heads and names,
But
and
based
I'm
on
all
the
out of names,
evidence,
so taking your
yes.
heads.
Yes. Based on
Power of the
how
wolf.
awful Ned Stark did in King's Landing, um, I I don't see John unless he does become a lot more wolfish,
Yeah,
being successful at,
he is gonna have
yeah.
to. He really is going to have to. I talked a little bit about imposter syndrome earlier, and a part, and trust me, I know because I have it. Part of imposter syndrome is also worrying about what other people think about you, and I think hopefully he'll give that up after he comes back. He's gonna be like, you know what? I don't give a shit about what you guys think.
Yeah.
I am going to do what I think and know is right, and you're gonna get in line, and that's, I think, what needs to happen. And I also hope that in the books, it's gonna be a little bit better in the show as far as him just walking off and being like, well, I died, so I'm not part of the Night's Watch anymore. Like, I hope in the books it's going to be a little bit better than that, because that was like really quick in the show. And I was like, that was not resolved. Not resolved.
I know, but I can't wait. I can't wait to see that. I
I
can,
know.
or to read
I really
that.
want him to mic drop as he walks out. Like,
Yes.
just be like, you know what? You guys killed me. I'm out.
Yes, exactly.
Be
I
sassy, Jon. That's what we're saying, Jon. Is just be sassy,
yes,
Jon, when you
be
come back.
sassy.
Just
Yes.
don't give stop giving any craps about anything. Like, it's
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that if a part of demanding respect is taking criticism and then internalizing it when it is good and worthy, and then chucking everything else into the trash and saying, okay, thanks, I've listened to you, not going to follow that advice, basically.
And that's precisely why I think I'll like him less when he's more wolfish. I ride or die for John right now. Like, I love this guy, which is why I needed to write this letter, or we needed to write this letter, right? I love this guy, and but him being more wolfish, I think, will be okay because it would make him probably a more effective leader. He'd be more effective, right?
Yeah, I
Not
do think
giving
so.
too much. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that,
yeah,
and it's not to say that, like, that's the thing, is that if he disregards them, it's not that it will look like he doesn't care, because like we say in the letter, Julie, he kind of looks like he doesn't care already, right? With
good
this
point.
crappy quarters and not having a tail, like, it looks like he's kind of off doing his own thing. And at least if he were listening to people and making his own and being decisive, it would look like he's invested.
Exactly. It's a really good point. I love John so
Oh
much.
yeah,
Yeah.
he really annoyed me the first book, but I actually like him better by the fifth book. And I know those that are listening are like, Amy, you just crapped on him for a little over an hour, but I swear I do. I did not actually start legitimately liking John until the fifth book. As far as like, oh wow, this guy's now made it into my top 10 characters. Really, before then, he was not even inside of that. And that's because of what he did for the free folk, quite frankly. I think that one decision endeared him to me beyond measure. It really did. Oh no, I think I might have lost Julie. So I'm hoping she's gonna come back. But there she is.
Hi. Sorry, my audio went out for a second.
Oh no, that's okay, you're back.
I'm
Um,
back.
well, let's go ahead and do concluding thoughts on that note, Julie. What
Concluding
what is something
thoughts.
that you want to say to John, or something you want to reiterate? Let us have it, Julie.
John, I love you so much, but you're pissing me off. Why, oh, why didn't you grab the power that you were given by being elected Lord Commander and roll with it? With square those shoulders back, give those orders, get what you want, make people adjust to you. Why, oh, why didn't you do that? Ugh,
Just like Beyonce, see what you want and grind till you own it. I know there's nothing better than a super
exactly.
white girl quoting hip hop, so
Exactly.
like, it really, I do think that when he comes back, and he obviously will, this is not the end of John. But when he does come back, he's gonna have to stick it to some people. Like, he really is just going to have to stand up for some things.
Yeah.
Um,
But I love him
yes,
so
definitely.
much. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, Julie, is there anything else you'd like to say? I
That's
don't want to
thank you.
cut you off.
Thank you so much for having me tonight, Amy, and for, writing this letter to John with me. It's always such a pleasure to write with you and record with you. And thank you so much,
Yeah,
Amy.
I look forward to our future projects, which I hope will continue, because I have had such a good time talking to you about all these things.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, everyone. So please tune in next time for whatever I've got coming up next, and we will see you next time. Thank you.